Afternoon. Today, I've got one important tip for your investment risk. When we talk about risk, we're talking about the potential for different outcomes. So when someone says to you, what's your risk tolerance when they're asking you about investing, they're essentially asking you, are you willing to lose money? The reason why is because if I say I'm willing to take more risk, that doesn't mean that I'm going to make more money automatically. There's a prevalent myth that a riskier investment means that you're going to make more money, and that's not true. What it means is you could make more money, but you might not, and you also might lose money. So that's very important to understand when we are investing and we're trying to assess our risk. The tip that I want to leave with you today, though, is that it's very important to know what your financial goal is. Is it to buy a house? Is it to achieve financial independence? Is it to retire at a certain point in your life? The reason this is important is because you need to make that plan with a certain number in mind, right? You have to keep in mind that there's a certain amount of money you're going to have at some date, or you're going to need to have at some date in the future in order to achieve that goal. When you're investing and you're trying to assess what kind of risk you want to take, you also want to compare different types of investments. For the purposes of simplicity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use two different stock market indexes in this video. And these are indexes that are available in the Thrift Savings Plan, the TSP. So active duty military, even retired military, government employees are allowed to save in the TSP. And if you aren't in the military and you save in a 401k or a 403b, your retirement plans also have different investment options. And there are probably some that are similar to the ones that I'm going to describe now. But in the TSP, you've got a number of different funds. And I'm going to compare two different funds very briefly to give you an example of how you want to do your own risk assessment. First, there are target date funds that you can invest in, and those automatically invest your money for you. But if you want to do it yourself, this is a way that you can do it. If you compare two funds, one is called the C Fund, which is the S&P 500, and one is called the S Fund, which is the Dow Total Market Completion Index. And what that is all publicly traded stocks in the US that don't include the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 are one group, the most commonly tracked index, and then the Total Market Completion Index are all of the other companies. So a lot of mid cap, small cap, smaller companies. The S&P 500 are bigger. The Dow Total Market Completion Index are mid cap and smaller. The bigger companies have less risk associated with them. And the reason why is because they're larger, they've been around longer, they have more financial resiliency and strength, they're able to weather the storm better. Whereas the smaller companies have greater risk because they don't have as many resources, they're maybe not as well financially established, and so they're going to be more volatile. Over longer periods of time, the statistic shows us that the smaller companies outperform the larger companies, and that's because they have greater growth potential. Now, that also means that there's greater volatility. So you need to make sure that you understand that. When you're looking at your financial goal, you want to look at your time horizon. When do I need to have this by? If it's a date that's much further out, I can invest in smaller companies. If it's a date that's closer, then I probably want to put my stock investments in the larger ones. Over longer periods of time, and we're talking like 20 years, the small cap outperformed the large cap. The S fund over the last 20 years has produced a return of about 9.2% a year. Whereas over the last 20 years, the S&P 500 has only done about 7.3%, including dividend reinvestment. That's a 2% difference. That's significant over a long period of time if you're adding that up every year because of the magic of compounding. But if we shrink that time horizon, the larger companies can outperform the smaller ones. In the last 5 years, the S&P 500 has done about 11%, whereas the Dow Total Stock Market Completion Index has only done about 9%. So the larger companies over the last 5 years have outperformed by about 2% per year. So if you have a shorter time horizon, you need to recognize that the bigger companies are going to be safer. They're still going to give you a good return, but they're going to be safer and not as volatile. You need to look at those when you're trying to assess what kind of a mix I want to have in my portfolio and your portfolio, depending on what your individual goal is. It's a complicated topic. So please post a question or a comment. We can address your individual concerns. Post any questions or comments. I always enjoy reading them. Send me a private message if you want to talk about it privately. I always enjoy reading your comments. And until next time, I wish you unlimited success.